This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 71, How Fascinating is Your Content? Part 8, Putting It All Together. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is May 15th, 2014. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 71 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your smartphone or your iPod or your listening device of choice. Excuse me. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. In last week's podcast, we continued our series called How Fascinating is Your Content, based on Sally Hogshead's groundbreaking marketing book, Fascinate, Your 7 Triggers to Persuasion and Captivation. Last week, we talked about the 7th and final fascination trigger, and that is trust. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to click on over to iTunes or to Stitcher or to the RSS feed and get all caught up. So that brings me to today's topic. Today we are wrapping up our How Fascinating is Your Content series by showing you how to put all these fascination triggers together in your content. But first, let's check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. While looking at this week's news feed, it looks like it was the week of partnerships. We've got 2 pairs of powerful partners coming together for some new initiatives. First of all, LinkedIn and Evernote have announced that they are partnering on a new card scanning service. So, you know the scenario. You come home from a networking event, you've got a fistful of business cards, you want to connect with some of these people, but you're stuck, sitting at your computer, typing in their email addresses, trying to match up the right person with the right contact. And previously, what LinkedIn had done is introduced an app called Card Munch, where you could just snap a picture of the card with your smartphone and automatically get to that person's profile in LinkedIn. But it's actually transitioning this capacity to Evernote. And I did download the Card Munch app. I used it a couple of times, and it certainly worked very well. But apparently this new deal with Evernote is going to be much more powerful. According to the press release, in Evernote, you'll be able to view profile photos, job titles, and company information from LinkedIn right there in the notes that you created when you scanned those business cards. So it's kind of a, creating your own little directory in addition to what goes on LinkedIn. So we'll see how that transpires. Pretty cool stuff from LinkedIn and Evernote. Another partnership that came forward this week is that Amazon and Twitter are working on something really interesting. So if you see a tweet with a link to an Amazon product in there, now it has to be on Amazon, and you want to purchase that, all you do is reply to the tweet with the hashtag AmazonCart. And what will happen is that will automatically add the product to your cart. So the next time you are on Amazon, the product will be in the cart and you can check out. Particularly brilliant move on Amazon's part. And I really think this could usher in a whole new level of socially driven e-commerce by letting people put things in their cart with just a tweet. So we'll have to see how that transpires going forward. Also in the news feed, there's a new app that I have seen. I have not played with it yet, but I have seen, and it sounds really interesting. It's called Adobe Voice. And what Adobe Voice does is it lets you create narrated videos. So you go into the app and you can select images that would flip through like a slideshow. And apparently they have over 25,000 images, from landscape photographs to simple little icons. And you can select those images and then you add your voice to narrate the story that you're telling through these images. So it's a really interesting concept, and I really like it because it's a new twist on the storytelling vibe that is becoming so prominent in marketing today. Anyway, the app is now available. It's currently available on the iPad only. I have downloaded it, but I have not yet had the chance to really play around with it. So when I do, I will report back and let you know how it goes. So, hey, look at that. We got through a whole news feed with no mention of Facebook. How often does that happen? Content hit of the week for this week is a great blog post I stumbled across called 8 Brain Triggers Guaranteed to Boost Your Social Media Marketing. That is by Jordan Kassler over on the Marketing Land blog. And I love this post because the whole psychology of marketing is really a pet interest of mine. This is why I've so enjoyed these book studies that we've done that really kind of go into the psychological triggers behind what we do when we engage with that people go through when they engage with marketing. So this post poses the question, and I quote, "How do we, as social media's guinea pigs, filter through a world's worth of information, especially when it's free and available in an instant?" And from there it goes on to tap into specific brain triggers that make social media posts more appealing. And there are certain things that really tap into certain triggers in the brain that can make your post more appealing on a psychological level. Totally nerdy, totally dorky, so yeah, totally up my street. So if you are interested in such things, I recommend you check this post out, and I will provide that link in the blog post. That's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so we can share, and I will provide that contact information at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. How fascinating is your content? Part 8, Putting It All Together. Today we are wrapping up our series based on Sally Hogshead's book Fascinate, Your 7 Triggers to Persuasion and Captivation. So if you are just joining us at the tail end of the series, let me briefly get you caught up. So Fascinate was a book that came out in 2010, and it very quickly became required reading for marketers. It was a very interesting take on the whole marketing question. And what Sally Hogshead does in this book is she goes through 7 psychological triggers that cause us to become fascinated, whether that's fascination with a person, with an object, with a brand, with an experience, with an idea, etc. And it is a truly fascinating book, pun intended. And as I was reading it, I got to think about how we can apply these fascination triggers to our work as content marketers. So what we've been doing is over the last 7 episodes, we've gone through all 7 of those triggers one by one, and today we discuss how to put it all together, or as Sally puts it, how to create your plan of attack to make your own message more fascinating. Now I'm going to give you fair warning. I'm going to go through the last 3 chapters of this book in rapid succession, so I'm going to throw a lot of information at you really, really quickly. So be ready. And by the way, I do recommend that you pick up a copy of Fascinate and give it a read. It's it's a great read. It's very entertaining. Lots and lots of anecdotes, and it really gives you some great insights into how people become fascinated. So do pick up the book. Okay. So the plan of attack, as Sally puts it, involves 3 stages. Those are evaluation, development, and execution. So the first stage is evaluation. So it's to evaluate your message, or in our case, to evaluate your content against what she calls the 6 gold hallmarks of a fascinating message. And the way you do that is by going through 6 questions, which I'm going to run through pretty quickly right now. The first question is, do we provoke strong and immediate emotional reactions? So as marketers, our go-to strategy tends to be, well, we want to offend the fewest people possible. But actually, immediate kind of gut reactions are a key characteristics of all fascinating brands, and by connection, by fascinating content. So, and I love what she says here. She says, if you're not getting a negative reaction from someone, you're probably not fascinating anyone. So we need to look for those emotional reactions to our content. Question number 2, do we create advocates? So are there people out there who are both passionate and vocal about your content? Do you have a fan base of people who follow everything you do, who share and comment on your content on a regular basis, and who bring other people into that conversation for you? Question number 3, are we, quote, cultural shorthand, unquote, for a specific set of actions or values? Now, the flip side of this, the opposite of this question would be, are we trying to be all things to all people? Because, as we know, that is pretty much the kiss of death for a content marketer. If you try to be all things to all people, you are going to mean nothing to anybody. So we really need to think about what our content stands for and ask the question, whom does it serve? Question number 4 is, do we incite conversation? So fascinating content is not just widely read and widely consumed, but it also entices people to get involved, to share their opinions, and to engage in discussion about the topics that you are addressing in your content. Question number 5, do we force competitors to realign around us? And this is an interesting question. The example that Sally puts forth is Zappos, the online shoe company. When they started offering free shipping both ways, it really forced their competitors to sit back and evaluate how they were addressing the same issues. How easy were they making it to return their products? And content can do the same thing. If you are doing something new and innovative and just going gangbusters with it, your competitors might be giving you a second look. And as Sally says in the book, content can, quote unquote, turn your innovations into your consumers' expectations. So what are you doing that's new and different that make people reevaluate what they expect from content from people in your industry? And question number 6 is, do we trigger social revolutions? So around that question to ask is, are we shaking things up? Are we addressing misconceptions? Are we looking at popular trends and developments and either saying, yes, this is the way to go, or are we being the little boy who says the emperor has no clothes? Are we triggering those kinds of social revolutions, both big and small? So those are the 6 questions around the first part. Goodness, this is confusing. The 6 questions around the first part of the evaluation stage. And the second part of that evaluation stage is to identify your primary triggers. Now, we've gone through all 7, one per podcast episode, and those are lust, mystique, alarm, prestige, power, vice, and trust. And of course, you are more than welcome to go back and listen to those episodes if you're just joining us for this series. So as we've talked about these triggers, you've probably recognized at least 2, probably maybe 3 or 4 that are applicable to your brand and your content and your audience. So what Sally advises us to do is to think about these triggers not so much as, oh, I have this, I don't have this, but think about it as a chemistry set. And think about it as you're combining these triggers in different proportions. So, for example, if you are in the financial services industry, you're probably going to have a healthy dose of trust as part of your fascination. Let's call it your fascination cocktail. But you can also add some other elements in there. There might be, half a beaker of prestige thrown in there, and maybe a quarter beaker of power thrown in there. So it's really all about creating that combination that really represents what is fascinating about your brand. And then once you wrap your brain around which triggers to apply to you and what proportion, you're really going to have a deep insights into what fascinates people about your content. And then you can decide how to amp up that fascination by really figuring out new and interesting ways to rock those triggers. So that is it for the evaluation stage. That is stage 1 of your fascination plan of attack. Stage 2 is development, and this is where you can develop new ways to fascinate your audience. So in stage 1, get my terminology mixed. Stage 1, you covered how you already fascinate your audience, that chemistry set that represents your fascination cocktail, if you will. And in stage 2, what you can do is explore how to push the envelope. And what Sally advises doing is to look at 7 different areas and to really ask what describes your brand, your company, your persona in this area. And those 7 areas are, number 1, purpose, so your reason for being in business. Number 2, core beliefs, the values and the principles that you stand for. Number 3, heritage, so your company's reputation and your history. Your products or services, number 4. Number 5, benefits, what people actually get out of your products and services. What is the end result? Actions, how you and your team conduct yourselves. And then finally, number 7, culture. All those characteristics of your business identity kind of wrapped up. Think about the Virgin culture that Sir Richard Branson started versus the Ford Motor Company culture. Very fascinating in their own ways, but very, very different. So what she advises us to do is to go through all 7 of those areas and just kind of brainstorm around them. Brainstorm, what is your heritage? What is your culture? What are some of the words and phrases you would use to describe your brand, your business in those areas? And once you've done that, once you've done a little creative brainstorming, you might see some patterns start to emerge. And as those patterns emerge, you might start to see shades of another trigger that might not make sense by itself, but it might work perfectly as a complement to another trigger. This is especially useful if you maybe have a strong trigger that has kind of become diluted over time and then really lost its effectiveness. Or is not as effective as it used to be. So, for example, if your primary trigger is trust, that trust message can, if you rely solely on that, can become a little bland and a little predictable over time. So maybe you can shake things up by adding a little, for example, alarm into the mix, or maybe prestige. Kind of spice things up by adding those different elements and creating a fuller, more diverse and more faceted. More faceted fascination. How's that for a little alliteration? But see where you can add some other triggers into the mix to make things a little bit more rich, bit more contextual. So that is it for stage 2 of your plan of attack, which was the development stage. And finally, we move into stage 3, which is execution. This is where you unleash your new plan of attack. And one thing that Sally recommends is before you unleash this new fascination plan on your audience, go ahead and spend some time with your internal team. Get your team support, share your ideas about those fascination triggers, go tell them the process that you went through to uncover those triggers, and talk about how they benefit or how they cause people to become fascinated with your content. And I say feel free to talk to everybody, sales, administrative support, the guys in the warehouse, the top brass, and be sure to educate them on how these fascination triggers came about and how they are going to drive your content going forward and why that is a good thing. Also in stage 3, you're going to measure, research, and reevaluate. So as you tap into a different blend of fascination triggers, kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on and see how it's being received. So you're going to want to look at things like quantitative evaluation. So you want to look at blog traffic, social shares, social likes, comments, retweets, things like that. But you also want to really look at what people are saying. So, read those tweets that people are writing about your content. Read those, when someone shares a post of yours on Facebook, what do they say? What do they lead in with? And that's going to help kind of inform your fascination strategy going forward. And then finally, you want to keep track of your progress over time. So again, not just the analytics. Keep track of things like community participation, interest by third parties. Are third parties sharing your content even though they're not specifically in your audience? Also, what if you want to take it offline, what consumers and prospects are saying to your salespeople? What are they saying about that latest ebook that was a little bit different? And What that's going to do is help you stay on track, and it'll also let you keep fine-tuning that fascination plan as you move forward. So that's my take on how we as content marketers can put together everything we've learned about these 7 fascination triggers and how they work. So I hope you have found this series to be informative. Again, I do recommend you pick up a copy of the book, give it a read it a couple of times, highlight it, and really think about how these fascination triggers apply to your work as a content marketer. And kind of an exciting side note here is Sally Hogshead actually has a new book coming out this summer. It's called How the World Sees You. And as part of that promotion, I'm hoping to get her as a guest on the podcast in an upcoming episode. So I've been in conversation with her, and we're talking about dates, so we're going to see if we can get her on the show and get her take on how we can fascinate with our content. So pretty exciting, and I will keep you posted on that, so stay tuned. If you have any questions about today's Spotlight segment, or if you want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will provide that information at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about content syndication, and that is the process of pushing your content out into third-party sites. So syndication sites, basically what they do is they kind of go out looking for good content that is related to their field of specialty and kind of resharing it. It's almost like an affiliate program for content. For example, 2 of the syndication sites that are popular in my neck of the world, in the content marketing social media world, are Business to Community and Social Media Today. Those are 2 sites that routinely share, kind of reshare content that's been posted in other areas. And the way they work, I think each one works a little bit differently, but you have to apply. You have to submit yourself for consideration to be a syndicator on their site, and they would ask questions like, how many Twitter followers do you have? How long have you been blogging? What kind of, they might ask for your clout score, things like that. They just want to make sure that they get bona fide people whose content they are sharing. And then what they do is they will pull in your RSS feed. So they're pulling in RSS feeds from all these different sites, and then they monitor all these feeds and decide which content was going to be posted to their site. And there are syndication sites in just about every industry, and it's a really great way to get exposure, especially if you're just starting out or trying to ramp up your visibility. A recent example from my own experience is a few weeks ago, I published a blog post called 10 Things Successful Content Marketers Do. And it was picked up by the Business to Community site, and the reaction has been absolutely amazing. It's been tweeted over 300 times, and it's been shared on LinkedIn over 400 times. And one thing I liked about Business to Community is that when people tweet, so if people are reading the post and they click on tweet this, the tweet that pops up includes my own Twitter ID as well as the Business to Community. So it's helping my Twitter mojo every time people share that, as well as helping the site distribute good content. So it's kind of a win-win, and I do recommend that you do some research in your industry. Find out which sites are accepting syndicated content and go ahead and get on board to gain some exposure for yourself. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed our series on Sally Hogshead's book, Fascinate. If you have ideas for other books that we could do a similar study of, I would love to hear from you. Would love to do another one of these, and if you have suggestions, send them on over. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our blog at resonancecontent.com/blog, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. If you'd like to email me a question to cover in an upcoming tip of the week, you can contact me anytime at rachel@resonancecontent.com. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Frank Lloyd Wright. He once said, quote, regard it as just as desirable to build a chicken house as to build a cathedral, unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.